And now for something completely different.
Forget everything you've been told by others before. Get ready for the real deal, the full story. Real talk about money, markets, life. Now, it's The Real Investment Show with Lance Roberts. Presented by RIA Advisors.
And good morning and welcome to the show. This morning, it is, of course, Thursday, the second best day of the week. Michael Leibowitz joining us this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about narratives in the markets, and they're always changing, right? So we'll get into that. A couple of kind of big news items this morning, kind of right out of the gate, and we'll talk about a lot of stuff this morning. But Nvidia obviously reported earnings last night, blowout numbers on really both revenues and earnings. Really kind of not surprising. They're just in this massive growth mode right now. As we talked about, before on the show, a lot of the bears out there really trying to figure out why, how this whole AI thing isn't going to work out. It's not going to generate the revenue. It's not going to do this. It's not going to do this. This reminds me a lot of 1998, 1999, where there was a whole group of analysts out there that was like, oh, the dot-com bubble, blah, blah, it's going to bust. They were right? But there was a big difference between those companies then. A lot of those companies didn't have business models. They didn't have the underlying structure. A lot of these companies were just sticking .coms on the end of their names just to participate in the public markets. But part of that narrative was the internet was a fad, and it wasn't, right? AI is very different. These are companies generating billions of dollars in revenues, and that's what we saw yesterday. Revenues increased by 73% for Nvidia yesterday. And again, we kind of take a look at, its kind of average trend score overall. It's running really kind of at the top of the ranges right now. And more importantly, if you take a look at, price momentum, the risk of it, relative valuation is cheap. And take a look at earnings and fundamentals, structure of the company, very, very strong. This is not the .com of the 1990s, right? This is very different. These companies, Apple, Nvidia, AMD, these are companies generating billions of dollars worth of growth. They're innovating. They're building very big applications for what is going to be the future that's coming. I mean, AI is coming. It's not here. It's still coming. I mean, we're at the very, very beginnings of what artificial intelligence is going to be, how it's going to affect the economy. And this is one of the narratives that Mike and I will touch on a little bit this morning, is about this whole idea of, the deficit. And one of the big factors that is missed in this whole deficit projection is the benefit of what comes from an industrial revolution, which is what we're working in right now. This is a very different time that we're heading into over the next decade that a lot of people just really aren't giving much credence to. So we'll talk a lot about that this morning as well. The other big news this morning is that a U.S. trade court has overturned Trump's tariffs. So the dollar's rallying this morning kind of right out of the gate because, again, just as we have just been talking about this as of late, is that as we get back into the markets itself, that we're going to start to see this whole idea of how narratives are going to play out in terms of these tariffs. Well, now all of a sudden, it was all this concern about tariffs are going to create inflation, tariffs are going to cause all these other problems, and now all of a sudden, potentially, now again, there's very likely the administration is going to find a way around the trade court, or they're going to obviously appeal the ruling. So we're going to be in this for a while, but this is the problem with these narratives in the markets, because things can change so very quickly overall in the markets itself. So again, these are the kind of things that are going to move markets, or moving markets today. This morning, futures are pointing up about 200 points on the Dow, and on the S&P are up well over 1% this morning. So again, we're going to have a pretty good start right out of the gate as we get into the market this morning. So again, let's talk a little bit about what you need to know before the bell. Nvidia this morning is going to open up about, make sure I'm on the right chart, they're going to open up about 6% this morning. So we're going to have a big gap to the upside. Nvidia had this bit of a correction, and here's what's interesting. For all the conversation about the Mag 7 and the big short selling in the Mag 7, everything else. This has been a really kind of interesting period, for the stock. Yes, the stock has pulled back, but over the last year, the stock has just been trading sideways after a phenomenal run. If we go back 5 years on this chart, we have to remember that kind of during 2022, the stock went all the way down to about $90 a share before it split, right? And then it did a big split. So back in 2022, you had this very big decline. This stock has gone from 20 to 135 in 4 years. So it's had a massive run. So again, when we talk about this correction, everybody's like, it's the death of the Mag 7, Nvidia's done, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be close to setting a new all-time high today. We're going to be pushing up in this previous kind of top of this range. But importantly, the stock has just been consolidating this massive run that we saw over the last few years. And again, that's not surprising. Stocks need to do that. It's healthy. It allowed, this kind of consolidation, it allowed for earnings and valuations to catch up with the price. And so we've seen that as the price has stagnated, earnings have continued to grow. We've lowered that valuation, the PEG ratio, the price to earnings growth, that ratio has been brought down dramatically. So again, these consolidations are good. And these are opportunities generally for investors to invest in markets and again take advantage of these opportunities. But again, a lot of these bearish narratives are always out there. It's like, oh, it's the end of AI, Nvidia's over. They're going to lose their, leadership, whatever it is. But they just keep coming out every single quarter. New products, new developments, new outlooks, new increasing sales as this whole division of building AI factories in this country is really getting underway here. But let's talk about the S&P itself. Again, just as we looked at the market, we've had this very big rally. We had this very big decline back here in April. That is now behind us, and with this move today, we're going to be pushing out to a new high relative here. We had this push up, this retest of the 200-day moving average. We're going to break that little recent high. That is a confirmed support test of that 200-day moving average. So we now have a pullback and a test, and we'll have a breakout today that confirms that support did actually hold here. So the next move higher here is going to be a test of all-time highs, which are going to put us back around 6130 on the index. So the wind right now is behind the market. We still have a lot of buybacks coming into the markets. That's still processing. Earnings today is actually wrapping up earnings season. So, this has been a very, very strong month. Despite this 20% decline that we had in March and, into April, the market has almost fully recovered that. We're now basically have done about an 80% recovery as of today of that entire decline. So if you'd just been asleep since January the 1st, you haven't really noticed anything this year so far. But this is the challenge with markets, as we talk about a lot, is that you've got to be careful, and this is something Mike and I will talk about more this morning. Got to be careful of these narratives, right? Lots of great narratives out there about why this is going to fail or why that's going to fail. But this market keeps denying all of that, whether it's been tariffs, whether it's been economics, whether it's been interest rates or inflation. This market keeps holding support. And again, it is what it is. Love it, hate it, dismiss it, argue against it, call it all conspiracy theory, call it fake government numbers, whatever you want to do. The reality is the reality. If you want to make money in this market, you got to follow what the prices are doing, and the prices are clearly bullish here. The trends are turning more bullish. This correction is now officially over. We are overbought here. So in the month of June, certainly expect a bit of a pullback, a bit of correction, give you an opportunity to get some capital invested. But this bullish trend to the market still remains fully intact right now. That's what you need to know before the bell this morning. We'll come back, pick up with Michael Leibowitz. We'll talk about narratives on a whole lot of different things, bonds, interest rates, the dollar, more. Don't go away.
Get daily investment news you can use, delivered at the speed of the internet at realinvestmentadvice.com.